Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
This episode is also brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds and everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Hey, welcome back to another episode of NETtlen, a spinoff of the Fun Belt podcast where we talk Sun Belt hoops, all part of the Believe Network. And it's been a wild couple of weeks of Sun Belt basketball. We've talked about if it's kind of a down year for the conference. Maybe there's not that, elite team or the elite non-conference wins this year that maybe we've had in the past couple. But what we do have is a very entertaining race for the regular season championships, those ultra important top 2 and top 4 seeds. It's going to be really close going down the stretch. Among those teams that is tied for first right now is Troy, after getting a huge victory at Arkansas State to really create that 4-way tie, bring Arkansas State back to the pack with that road victory. So today I've got with me Jason Jones from the Trojans Together Collective, one of the founders of that. Talk a little bit about, what Troy has done this year, how they got to this point, putting together the team that they have, and, how much he celebrated on Saturday with that road victory for the Trojans. Jason, thanks for coming on. And I'll start with that. How much did you celebrate Saturday down the stretch of that one where it was close game, but your Trojans were able to just kind of answer every little comeback attempt that Arkansas State made on Saturday?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shane. As far as celebrating, it's hard to celebrate when you're just exhausted from watching a game on television. I mean, it was just, the back and forth. The first half we didn't look so well. Second half really picked it up. There's some back and forth and looked like you have it sealed, and then they make a little run as well. And it was just stressful. So I don't know if there was any actual celebrating. We were very excited, but we needed an IV just sitting on our couch watching it.
Yeah, that was one of the most entertaining games I've watched on TV this year. Just, in the Sun Belt anywhere, just the way those two teams play. Like, It seems like there's 3 or 4 guys flying through the air towards the rim at any moment with those two. There's more guys in the air than on the floor. Yeah. It seems like at times where guys going for block shots, flying for rebounds, just going to the rim, trying to dunk it. Like, it was a party at the rim that whole game. And
absolutely
not a ton of fouls called, even, playing that style. It was a lot of fun to watch. Maybe not so much if you're, our friend Jeremy or any of the other Arkansas State.
That's right.
But it was a great game, and I think a great showcase for the Sun Belt on national TV with that one.
I agree. The Sun Belt was the real winner there. Troy was the secondary winner, but the Sun Belt was able to put a good product on the floor for the nation to see, and that's good for all of us involved. And it's probably the right time of year to have a game like that for people to see who are normally not going to see a Sun Belt game.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was the intention when they came up with the new tournament bracket, to give the top 2 seeds the bye to the semifinals, top 4 get into the quarterfinals, which is pretty good too. But, to set it up like that, I don't know if that was necessarily the intention that you'd have all these really important games down the stretch, but it's sort of a byproduct that now we're all watching Troy and Arkansas State. We're all going to be watching Arkansas State and South Alabama next week. We're going to be watching a lot of Texas State games because they play everybody in the lead, it seems like, down the stretch. Like, I know they want to send the best teams to the NCAA tournament. That was the main goal of it. But I think if you're Keith Gill, conference commissioner, you also just got to be excited about the fact that people are going to want to watch your regular season games here in February, which maybe isn't always the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said about the rest of the schedule, I was looking at the 4 teams who are tied for first and looking at the path to finish the year to get those top 2 spots. And I really like where Troy's sitting. We've got some of the guys coming up who've not had a great year, with the exception of Texas State, who got us at home. That was the same week that Ark State got us at home, and that was a rough week at Trojan Arena. 2 games that we felt like we had won, had sealed the deal, and next thing you know, they're both at losses. And so the revenge game went well at Jonesboro, and I hope it goes well in San Marcos coming up in the next week or so.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on just how huge that was on Saturday too. To do that on the road, where Arkansas State had won, I think, 15 in a row.
15, yeah.
They're in Jonesboro. They've been really, really good at home. They just killed. I mean, I know they've lost 3 of the last 4, but they just killed Southern Miss, which is a talented team. They have their ups and downs, but to just run them off the court the way they did there in Jonesboro, not an easy place to play. And you go get a really tough win. And, like you said, it's for Troy, they maybe had like sort of the toughest path, which I think is maybe the most impressive thing, to be tied for first right now. Because, you look at something, James Madison, like I think they had a little bit easier path to get to where they are right now, tied for first. So, they got Troy at home, they got Arkansas State at home, got Arkansas State at home without Kobe Julian too. Like, maybe by the end we might be talking about how Duke got a little bit lucky to be playing in the East and get the home games they did. But Troy, I think, is just really impressive where they've gotten to this point. A really, really good coaching job by Scott Cross, I think.
No doubt. And you started this by talking about, the team as a whole. And let's go back a step. And Cross has those Texas connections. A lot of great recruiting in Texas. Half our roster is from Texas, the other half is from Alabama, and there's a couple mixed in there from other places as well. But he does a good job of mixing that up. Having those contacts back in Texas have created some real stud athletes for us, and being able to keep all those guys, getting them back for this year with that nucleus that was created last year. And if you watching Troy basketball, every week there's a different guy who steps up. Saturday night was Jackson Fields' night. I mean, 5 3-pointers, which is nearly double his output for the season from behind the arc. One of my favorite guys on the team. He's just a great guy, and so proud for him for having that night Saturday night. But having the roster that he's got, from being able to recruit from across the country, but when you've got the state of Texas, that there's a lot of talent out there, and he's got those guys that come to Alabama from Texas, and we're able to build around them and hang on to them and move forward.
Yeah, you talk about like it being a different guy's night every time. Whenever I think of Troy, I think of Victor Valdez, and he's not necessarily the star player, but he's one of those guys that, you always have a lot of teams playing at the same time. I don't necessarily get a chance to watch everybody's entire game.
Right.
Like every time I turn on Troy, he's the guy who's making a play. And then you look and see he averages like 5 points a game, and he's not a star player, but he's a guy who can really make a difference. And there's just a lot of those guys on the Troy roster, it seems like.
And to your point, Victor Saturday, I don't know how many points he had, but I know he had 4 free throws in the final minute, and that's all that mattered, because that was the difference. He's not a starter. He's a great role player. Miles, the team revolves around Miles and Tate Conaway, and those 2 guys get all the headlines, and deservedly so. They're great. Tatum's going to play for the Globetrotters at some point, because his passes are just phenomenal. I mean, wherever he's not looking is where he's going to pass the ball, and that always leads to some points and gets those assist numbers up. But those role players, there was a game 2 weeks ago at home where Theo Singh had 17 points off the bench. You never know who that guy is going to be. Vic led us one of the non-conference games this year. Victor was the leading scorer of that game. So you don't know, and that's the beauty of this roster. And like we talked about earlier, being able to bring all those guys back from last year made a big difference for this season, and we're where we knew we needed to be. It just took a little longer to get back to first place like we should have been.
Yeah, well, let's transition into that part of the conversation, because you mentioned 2 guys. Troy brought back a lot of players, but you bring back, Miles Rigsby and Tatum Connerway and 6th man of the year last year. It's kind of rare in this conference that you got an award winner that's back. Like that just doesn't seem to happen that often in the Sun Belt recently with the transfer portal. Those two guys in particular, I imagine, had to have other options and, probably more guys on the team. But Troy was able to bring back basically their core group. They didn't have to go hit the portal a lot, find guys who maybe do or don't upset your chemistry or fit with your style of play. Being, where you are with the collective and everything, kind of take me through how Scott and you guys at the collective were able to kind of keep this roster together to, I don't know if it's the most talented roster in the Sun Belt, but it has a lot of talent and it has that cohesiveness that I think is the reason they are where they are.
Yeah, and what you just said about award winning, Miles was the newcomer of the year and Tate was the 6th man of the year.
Yeah.
So those are two guys that got as high accolades as they can get in the Sun Belt, and we were able to retain them. And first credit goes to Cross and the staff. They want to play for that bunch because they're great guys, they're great leaders, and they're great coaches as well. And they take good care of them, treat them like family. And then it comes to us. We've had this collective going for a year and a half, and we said this months ago. Our biggest accomplishment was men's basketball, and we were waiting to see how it played out this year. But it is what it is in this day and age. You got to take care of guys to keep them, and we did the best we could, and it paid off. And our naming right sponsor, Norris Insurance Group, we've got something that many schools don't have, and that's whole roster deals. Every player on our men's and women's basketball is getting paid. So that are U.S. citizens. Let's be clear, so we're not breaking any rules, because there are stupid rules by the NCAA where only U.S. citizens can be paid. But we have whole roster deals for men's and women's basketball, and being able to have good sit down conversations. Chuck, my partner in this thing, he's the money guy. He's a financial advisor. He has sat down and talked to guys and showed them what real money looks like, what real taxes look like, what real offers look like from another school, and what that real money actually turns out to be. What's sliding in those direct messages is not real money sometimes. And we show what we actually are going to do with them. We don't make any promises we don't keep. And those guys trust us. It goes back to, signing them the first time. We signed 5 of those guys, the five in the nucleus last year. We signed them, and they had that trust in us as we moved into this season when we were able to retain all of them. And they've called and have had real conversations about life and money and things like that. So we've got a great relationship with men's basketball. And again, it kind of goes back to the coaching staff and the trust that they put in Coach Cross and his crew, and it just it bleeds in over to our world as well.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of things that are most important when you're talking about a mid-major program, is because you're not going to be able to just flash $1 million that they may or may not get. Like you said, real money, but you're able to offer something, and they can trust that that's what they're going to get. What you say is what's going to happen.
That's right.
And also, talk about, Scott Cross and his staff just being able to evaluate talent and finding the guys that fit and, are going to tough. I mean, that to me, the trust and the evaluation are kind of like the two pillars for building a mid-major program right now. And it seems like Troy's done about as good a job of that as, could be asked for.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'll say this, across all sports, we've talked to, obviously, and specifically football and baseball, we've had a lot of transfer guys who've been all over the place, and we've talked to them. Tell us about the collective you came from. What was it like? And the feedback we've had, and this was our goal from day one, is we're real. I mean, that's the beauty of Troy, is it's a small, close knit community. Chuck and I can go talk to the coaches or players anytime we want to. We don't sugarcoat anything. We're real is the word I can come up with. We're real with them. They're real with us. We've got real relationships with them. It's not transactional. It's relational. And so that's across all sports. But basketball is just that one sport that can have that immediate impact with a fewer number of players. And so it's easier to have those conversations with them and just build those relationships to get to the point where we're at. And again, we're at the first place where we knew we should be, and hope to finish there when the season's over.
Yeah, you hit on it too. Like, that's a major difference between basketball and football is, even if you miss on a couple guys in basketball, you may still have 9 or 10 really good players that you were able to put together through, what you were doing collective wise. And, it's hard for a group of 5 program probably to really land the roster that they want. Like when we're talking 85 players, whereas opposed to 12 players and 5 on the court at one time for basketball, like it seems like an area where mid-majors can maybe possibly compete in the NIL space in a different way. Not that you can't in football, but it's just a different game in basketball.
That's right. And it is. And again, you never know who that guy is going to be from week to week. And in Troy's case specifically, it helps to spread that wealth. And, I hate that Jack had his best game of the season on national television. You hear football coaches talking about not having their spring games anymore because they don't want to be poached. So when we have guys have those big games, it needs to be when we're on ESPN Plus and not on the mothership.
Yeah, although I don't know that there's actually any secrets anymore.
Yeah, you're right
out there, but I do get what you're saying. Yeah, you talk about guys having big games. Let's talk about Tayton Connerway. Just his season so far. I mean, I think in the running for Sunbelt Player of the Year, I think he has to be at this point, especially if Troy wins it, like the regular season. I think that goes in his favor. But just you talked about his assists, his passing, one of the best in the country when it comes to stealing the ball defensively. Mm-hmm. And then it seems like a guy who isn't going to force it offensively early in the game, but then the ball is going to be in his hands late when it's time to make a play. And, we've seen that in a couple of games here recently where he's, really made key plays down the stretch. Just, tell me about getting to know him and, what he's brought to the program as a guy who was willing to come off the bench last year and, kind of become like the number one guy this year.
Yeah. So getting to know him, it goes back to relationships. Whenever you see one of those guys, there's 4 or 5 with them. They travel in a pack. They hang out. They enjoy being around each other. They're friends off the court. It's a crazy deal to see the relationships that these guys have and just enjoy, hanging out and that translates on the court. So, we met Tate, we didn't really know him last year as well, getting to know him in the off season through these other guys just from being around them. And, he's just like the rest of them. They're just cool college kids that are good at basketball and have fun while they're out there. And his thing is he's just a heck of a passer and a shooter and can take over the game when he needs to. Miles Miles doesn't get enough credit for being a defensive guy. He's always going to be guarding the best player on the other team, and he's always going to put his body on the floor. And they both are typically the leading scorers, but Miles usually getting more done on defense that people don't talk about, while Tayton's doing the things on the offensive side. But again, that goes back to those assists, and you never know who's going to be on the receiving end of that, who's going to be the leading scorer to get you through that win. Yeah,
and you mentioned both those guys being the rare postseason award winners who come back to a Sunbelt program. What do you think? I mean, we talked a lot about the trust, everything else. Was there anything in particular, I guess, beyond the NIL space and things like that? What made Troy such a good fit for those two guys in particular that's where they wanted to continue to be?
I mean, honestly, I think it's camaraderie. What I just said about that group is always together. I mean, obviously you're cheating because you got the Rigsby brothers. So there's 2 of them that are built in. So that's cheating a little bit, but they're the nucleus. And then they're all from Texas. Jackson's from Texas. Tayton's from Texas as well. But, the funny story about Tayton is that apparently Coach Greg Young, who is Cross's top assistant, held Tayton in the hospital when he was born, because there's some relationship there with Tayton's dad. I guess he played for them. And so they go back to birth with Tayton Connerway and then, recruit him to come play at Troy, which is just a crazy story. But the guys just get along. They like the community. They like Troy, and obviously winning helps. And they knew, last year going into this year, they knew the potential was here for this season to have a great year. And again, we're still got a good month of basketball left, but I like where we're at, and I like our chances on how we can finish.
Yeah. Oh, building off of that, what do you think is the key for Troy in particular here over the next 4 games to close this out and, get one of those top 2 seeds?
To, first of all, put the Ark State game behind us. It was great. It was awesome, but it's over. It's the focus is who do we even have this week? I know we've got Coastal and Louisiana. I just don't know who's Coastal Saturday, Louisiana's Thursday. So, the focus on Louisiana on Thursday, handling business. Just, we had like I said, we had that slide a few weeks ago where we lost to Ark State and Texas State back to back. Had 9-point leads at halftime on both of those games. Lost them both in the final seconds. It's finishing and not waiting on somebody else to finish. You got to be the guy that steps up. And we've seen that the last few weeks is, I think there's a lot of relying on Miles to take over the game because he can. But if they've done their homework, they're making sure that Miles can't take over the game, which is going to leave somebody else open. So Marcus has stepped up. Jackson stepped up. Obviously, Tayton stepped up. Thomas Dowd has stepped up. He led us in scoring last week or the week before one of those games. So you just never know. So they all have to be ready when their number's called. They've got to be the guy. So to answer your question, the focus just has to be on everybody being ready to know their role. These last 4 games? Yeah, last 4 games, and just play like they're supposed to play. I mean, nothing crazy. You don't have to do anything extraordinary. Just play like you're supposed to play, and we're gonna finish in that top 1 or 2 spot where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. Hey, well, before I let you go, I'll let you plug, Trojans Together or anything else you want to, plug, want people to find out about as far as,
Sure.
helping the Trojans out here.
Yeah, thank you. TrojansTogetherCollective.com is the go-to for Troy athletics of keeping things rolling here in Pike County, Alabama. We got to continue to build that membership. We talked about retaining that roster. There's a lot of individuals who are involved in retaining the roster that aren't necessarily promoting their businesses through NIL. They just want to ensure that Troy continues to win, and they're given to the program. And so that's one of those things where people ask, how much do I have to give? You can give $20. It's going directly to student athletes' pockets. It doesn't. Chuck and I don't touch the money. It goes straight into our account to take care of our student athletes. We're here to ensure that Troy athletics continues to grow. And I mean, if you look in the state of Alabama in basketball, we've become a basketball state overnight. I don't know if you've paid attention to that or not, but we're a basketball state here right now, and we're finishing up the season strong across the state in all aspects. And then we got baseball right around the corner. We're proud of those guys we signed for baseball and the ladies in softball. So the collective is going year round, and we're proud of the student athletes that we've got that are representing us.
Yeah, it could be a pretty amazing March in Alabama with all those teams. And
for sure.
And Troy and South Alabama fighting it out. Those two.
I can't mention their name, but yeah, we're both apparently in the top 4 spots. Us and that team in Mobile that stole one from us. I'm not going to complain about officials on your show, but still, like when it's clear to all of us, I just don't understand how you can blow a call like that. But anyway, we should not be tied with them at this moment.
Yeah. Well, it'll make it pretty easy for you to root for Arkansas State on Wednesday, I suppose.
I will be howling like a wolf. Jeremy will be proud.
Yeah. Hey, well, I appreciate the time, Jason. It was great, very enlightening. I love finding out more about how everything works when it comes to NIL and these collectives. So I really appreciate the time, and good luck with everything going forward.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, that was Jason Jones from Trojans Together Collective to tell us, not only about this season for Troy, where they're one of 4 teams tied for first in the Sun Belt, but also, a little insight into how that team was, not just put together, but retained, which is a tough thing to do in this day and age when you're a Sun Belt or a mid-major program. We also can't really talk about Troy without talking about those other teams that are tied for first right now in the Sun Belt. And we alluded to Wednesday night, huge game, South Alabama at Arkansas State. Both of those teams 10-4, tied with Troy and JMU atop the leaderboard. All only a game ahead of App State, which is still right there. So one of those teams is going to drop out of that tie on Wednesday and set the table for some of these other teams that play after that. That's a 8 p.m. Eastern game on ESPN Plus, South Alabama, Arkansas State. The other Wednesday night game we have in the Sun Belt, ULM at Texas State. One of the games that doesn't have a huge impact at the top, but we're keeping an eye on Texas State here throughout the rest of the season because they do play 3 of those 4 teams that are tied right now. So their games are going to really have an impact on the all-important seeding for Pensacola. You really want to be a top 4, and you particularly want to be a top 2 if possible to get that bye into the semifinals. Thursday night in the Sun Belt, we've got Georgia State at JMU. Huge game there. Georgia State's been red hot as of late, shooting the lights out of the ball. See if they can continue to shoot it at that pace. That's a tough thing to do, continue to shoot about 50% from three-point range like they've done recently. But they're at JMU, trying to knock the Dukes off the top of the conference standings. Outside of that, you also have Georgia Southern at App State. That's the big rivalry there. 2 schools that do not like each other. App State trying to stay in the mix. Really can't afford to lose one, I think, to a Georgia Southern team that has a losing record in conference, and playing that one at home in the Holmes Convocation Center in Boone. App State's going to need that one. Marshall, ODU, another game on Thursday night. Louisiana and Troy, Thursday night. Trojans, similar situation to App State, playing at home. You want to keep the momentum. You don't want to get caught looking past a Raging Cajuns team that has struggled a bit this year, 6-8 in Sun Belt play. And then Coastal Carolina and Southern Miss in Hattiesburg rounds out the Thursday night slate. So some big matchups. You really got to pay attention to the entire conference here coming down the stretch. There's going to be some huge games. I just can't wait to see who ends up being a top 2 seed. Can't wait to see how much of an advantage that ends up being, or not an advantage where you have to wait over a week between games while the other teams get the chance to go play some games on the floor in Pensacola. We'll see how that all ends up playing out. But for a conference that didn't end up having, the top 50-ish type team, the potential at-large type team, the teams that knocked off, the likes of Michigan State and Auburn last year, like JMU and App State were able to do in the non-conference schedule last year, you end up with a pretty thrilling into the season here for the last 2 weeks. The last 4 games of the regular season is going to be really fun to watch, and you got some teams that are really surging at the moment. So really looking forward to that, and really enjoyed hearing more about Troy and their rise to this 4-way tie atop the Sun Belt standings. We'll talk more about that, how it all shakes out next week. We'll talk more about women's basketball next week too, where James Madison still undefeated atop the women's standings, just a game ahead of Arkansas State though. So those Red Wolves and Dukes are vying for the top spot in both the men and the women. Troy, not too far behind in the women's as well. So, between Jonesboro, Troy, and Harrisonburg, been some good basketball, men's and women's, plenty for their fans to get excited about this season. And it should be a fun race to Pensacola for both men and women. That'll just about do it for me today. This has been NETtlen, the Sunbelt basketball spinoff of the Fun Belt podcast, all part of the Believe Network. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you listening. We're going to record a full-size Fun Belt episode here later on tonight too. So we'll get a couple of episodes here coming up in your feed as basketball season really, really takes off. And once again, I'm Shane NETtlen, and thanks for tuning in.